The woman walked straight up to him in front of 200 people, slid her hand into his, and said 4 words that stopped every conversation dead. "He's my boyfriend." Commander James Calloway, decorated Royal Canadian Navy officer, widowed father of 1, stood completely frozen, while the most powerful woman in the room smiled like she'd just signed a $1 billion contract. He had never spoken to her before that moment. And somewhere across town, his 7-year-old daughter was waiting for him to come home. The alarm went off at 4:47 a.m. James Calloway was already awake. He had been awake since 3:15, lying on his back in the dark, listening to the ceiling fan click on every third rotation, a sound he had promised himself a dozen times he would fix and never did. Because fixing it meant having one less reason to lie there thinking. Thinking about Claire, thinking about Lily, thinking about the meeting he had 0700 that morning at the Halifax Naval Base with a defense contractor he had never met and didn't particularly want to. He reached over and silenced the alarm before it could make a second noise, swung his legs off the bed and sat on the edge of the mattress in the dark for exactly 30 seconds. That was his ritual, 30 seconds of stillness. Claire had started it. She used to say that a man who couldn't sit still for 30 seconds before sunrise would never be able to sit still when it mattered most. He had thought she was being philosophical. Now he understood she was being precise. He stood up, padded across the hall. Lily's door was cracked open the way she always left it. He pushed it wider and leaned against the frame. She was still asleep, one arm stretched sideways across the pillow. Her stuffed rabbit, she called it Captain, tucked under her chin. Her dark hair was everywhere. She had gotten Claire's hair wild and soft at the same time, the kind that looked like a disaster and somehow always looked beautiful. 5 more minutes, Bud, he said quietly. Not to wake her, just to hear his own voice say something kind before the day started. He went downstairs and made coffee. He made her lunch turkey on whole wheat, apple slices, a small bag of goldfish crackers that she would eat first, and then lie about eating first, and had it packed and in the refrigerator by 0520. He scrambled eggs. He cut the crusts off her toast because she was 7 and 7-year-olds had opinions about crusts, and some battles weren't worth fighting before the sun finished rising. At 0545 he went back upstairs. Lily time. A groan from under the blanket. Lily Grace Calloway. I am not going to say it 3 times. You always say it 3 times, came a muffled voice. Not today. A pause. You said that yesterday. He crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled the blanket back far enough to find her face. She squinted up at him like the light was personally offending her. She had his jaw, and Claire's eyes dark quick, always looking at something the rest of the room hadn't noticed yet. Hey, he said. Hey, she said back. How'd you sleep? I dreamed Captain could talk. What did he say? She considered this seriously. He said he was hungry and also that you owe him an apology for sitting on him last week. That was an accident. He didn't feel like it was an accident. Bye. James almost smiled. Almost. Get up. Eggs are on the stove. She sat up slowly, blinking. Are you going to be home for dinner? The question landed the same way it always did. Clean and quiet and exactly like a punch to the chest. I don't know yet, Bud. I'm going to try. That's what you said Monday. I know. And Tuesday. Lily. I'm not complaining, she said quickly. She looked down at Captain and straightened his ears. I'm just keeping track. He sat there for a second longer than he should have, watching her do that small, careful thing with the rabbit. That habit of straightening things, organizing things the way kids do when the world around them feels too uncertain to control. 7 years old and she was already learning how to manage her own disappointment. That did something to him that he was not going to name this early in the morning. Get up, he said again, and his voice came out softer than he intended. Eggs, 10 minutes. He dropped her at school at 0710. She climbed out of the truck, hauled her backpack onto one shoulder, and then turned back before she closed the door. A reflex. She always turned back. Dad, Yeah. Mrs. Patterson said, our class is doing a Canada Day project. We have to bring something that means something about our family for the thing on Friday. He looked at her. What kind of something? She said. It could be like a picture or an object or something that tells a story. She said the story was the important part. Lily chewed the inside of her cheek the way she did when she was trying to say something complicated. I was thinking about bringing Mom's flag. The flag? The one folded into its triangle sitting on the bookshelf in the living room, Claire's Canadian flag. He kept his hands loose on the steering wheel. You want to talk about that tonight? He asked. She nodded. Okay, we'll talk about it tonight. Go learn something. She almost smiled, closed the door, walked toward the school entrance without looking back a second time, which meant she was okay, which meant he could breathe. He exhaled, put the truck in drive, and went to meet a woman who was about to burn his entire life to the ground and build something completely different in its place. He had heard of Vivian Carter the way everyone in defense circles had heard of her in passing in briefings in the particular tone that people used when they wanted to sound neutral but weren't. Carter Defense Technologies, third largest private defense contractor on the East Coast. CEO is Carter's younger daughter. 34 years old. Never married. Doesn't take meetings, she doesn't call herself. That last part was the one everyone seemed most interested in repeating. James had not been particularly impressed. He had worked with contractors before. Some of them were sharp, some of them were not. What they all had in common was that they understood money better than they understood the people whose lives their contracts were supposed to protect. And he had learned a long time ago to say exactly what he needed to say in those meetings, and not one word more. He arrived at the base conference room at 0658. She was already there. That was the first surprise. She was sitting at the far end of the table with a single folder open in front of her and a coffee cup she had clearly brought herself. No entourage, no assistant hovering, no one else at all. She was writing something in the margin of what looked like a contract, and she didn't look up when he walked in. Commander Calloway, she said. Miss Carter, you're 2 minutes early. She turned to Paige. I appreciate that. You're 3 minutes earlier now. She looked up. She was sharper looking in person than the photographs in the briefing material suggested. Not softer, not harder, but more defined, like the difference between a photo of a blade and an actual blade. She had brown eyes that moved like she was calculating something, dark hair pulled back in a way that was professional without being effortful, and the particular stillness of someone who had learned that being completely still in a room made everyone else vaguely nervous. She studied him for about 4 seconds. He didn't look away. Sit down, she said. I have a problem and you've been recommended as someone who solves problems. What kind of problem? The kind that requires discretion, intelligence, and the ability to stand in a room full of people who hate you and give absolutely nothing away. She closed the folder. So, naval intelligence background, 3 deployments, decorated twice, single father for the last 4 years. Your commanding officer says you're the most controlled person he's ever worked with under pressure. She paused. He also said, you have no patience for people who waste your time, so I'll get to the point. James pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Please, I need someone to accompany me to my family's Canada Day gathering this weekend. A silence. And you're coming to me, he said carefully. Because I need someone who can think tactically in a social environment, keep a cover story straight under significant pressure, and not be remotely impressed by my family's money or status. She said it the way someone reads off a checklist. Most men I meet are either trying to get something from my father's company, or trying to get something from me personally. You, from everything I have read, are not particularly interested in either. What exactly is the cover story? She held his gaze. That we're in a relationship. Another silence, longer this time. Miss Carter. Vivian. He sat back. I'm an RCN officer, not an actor. I'm not looking for an actor. I'm looking for someone who can be honest in a room full of liars, which is actually much harder. She folded her hands on the table. I know this is unusual. I know this is probably not how you expected this morning to go, but I need you to hear the full situation before you say no, because the stakes are considerably higher than a family barbecue." He looked at her. She looked back. "Talk," he said. She talked for 40 minutes. By the end of it, he understood 3 things clearly. First, Vivian Carter was not asking for a favor. She was executing a plan, and she had chosen him the way she would choose any other asset, analytically, deliberately based on specific criteria she had identified and verified. That should have bothered him. Somehow it didn't, because he operated exactly the same way, and there was something clarifying about sitting across from someone who didn't bother to dress their decisions in sentiment. Second, the situation with her brother Garrett was not simply a family power struggle. What Vivian described carefully with the precision of someone who had rehearsed it without making it sound rehearsed was a coordinated effort by Garrett Carter to use their father's declining health and their family's annual gathering as cover for forcing a board vote that would effectively remove Vivian from leadership and install himself. Garrett had spent the last 8 months systematically convincing their father that Vivian's personal life, specifically the fact that she was single, worked constantly, and had no visible domestic stability, was evidence that she lacked the emotional grounding to lead the company through the next decade. "He's using your aloneness against you," James said. She paused. "Yes, that's a specific kind of manipulation. Yes. How long has he been building it?" "At least 2 years, based on what I've pieced together. The board vote timing isn't an accident. The Canada Day gathering isn't an accident. My father has a certain romanticism about the holiday, about family, about legacy. Garrett knows that. No. He's staging this third." And this was the part that stayed with James after the meeting ended, and he was walking back across the base in the early morning heat. Vivian Carter was not afraid of losing the company. She was afraid of what would happen to the people inside it if Garrett took control. He had seen enough of the world to know the difference between someone protecting their own power and someone protecting something beyond themselves. The difference was in the details. The way she talked about the engineering team that had been with her father since the beginning. The government contracts that funded rural manufacturing jobs. The long-term commitments to veteran hiring programs. She had quietly expanded without press releases or announcements. She wasn't performing concern. She was just stating facts, the way someone does when the concern is real enough that performing it would feel dishonest. He had respected very few people in the first 10 minutes of knowing them. He found somewhat reluctantly that she was one of them. He still said no the first time. "Game. I have a daughter," he said. "She's 7. The Canada Day weekend it's not a great time for me to disappear." "I know about your daughter," Vivian said. "I wouldn't have approached you if I thought this would put her in a difficult position. The gathering is 2 days starting Saturday morning. You'd be home by Sunday evening. She's spending the weekend with my neighbor, Margaret O'Shea." "Yes, your commanding officer mentioned her. She sounds like she genuinely loves Lily." He went still. "You researched my neighbor." "I research everything," Vivian said. "I'm not apologetic about that, but I want to be clear. I'm not looking to disrupt your daughter's life. I'm asking for 48 hours of your time, and I'm prepared to compensate." "Don't," he said. She stopped. "Don't offer me money for this," he said. "If I do this, it won't be for money." She studied him. "Then why would you do it?" He thought about that. Thought about everything she described. The veteran hiring programs, the engineering teams, the quiet commitments that nobody had bothered to publicize. Thought about a man like Garrett Carter, who had spent 2 years engineering his sister's fall, not because he believed in anything, but because he wanted the seat. He had spent his entire career fighting people who weaponized power against the people below them. He was tired. He had Lily's school project to think about, and dinner to plan, and a ceiling fan that needed fixing. He was absolutely not looking for another battle. "I'll let you know by Thursday," he said. She gave a single nod. No pressure, no performance of gratitude, just accepted. He stood, pushed in his chair, and walked toward the door. "Commander Calloway." He turned. "Whatever you decide," she said. "I meant what I said. You came highly recommended, not just for the mission parameters. A pause. As a person, he looked at her for a moment. Then he left. Thursday came. He had not made a decision. He told himself he needed more time. But the truth, if he was going to be honest with himself, and he was always, even when he didn't want to be, was that he had already decided, and he was just waiting for the right moment to stop pretending he hadn't. He told Lily about the trip Thursday evening while she was finishing dinner. "You have to go away?" she asked. "Just 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, you'll be with Margaret." "I like Margaret." She moved a piece of broccoli around her plate. "Is it for work?" "Sort of." She considered this with the particular seriousness she applied to most things. "Is it dangerous?" "No." "Is it important?" He thought about Vivian Carter's steady voice, the people inside it, the commitments, the hiring programs no one photographed. "Yes," he said. "I think it is." Lily nodded slowly. "Okay, then can I bring Captain to Margaret's?" "You can always bring Captain." She seemed satisfied. Then, she looked up at him with those dark, quick eyes. "Dad, are you sad?" The question caught him sideways. He set down his fork. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you get this face sometimes," she said. "Like when you're thinking about Mom. But you don't want me to know you're thinking about Mom." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm not sad right now," he said finally. "I'm just thinking about the work thing, about a lot of things." She reached across the table and patted his hand. She did it the way adults pat children's hands, gently, deliberately, with complete confidence that it would help. She had picked it up somewhere and started doing it a year ago, and it undid him every time. "It's okay," she said. "You don't have to tell me." "Lily." "Dad, I'm fine. Go do the important thing." She pulled her hand back and stabbed the broccoli with her fork. "But when you get back, you owe Captain an actual apology, like with words." He called Vivian that night. "I'll do it," he said. A pause, not surprised she hadn't been banking on no. Just a moment of something he couldn't read. "Thank you," she said. And then in a slightly different register, "My family will be a lot. I've led 15 men through the Strait of Hormuz under radio silence," he said. "I'll manage your family." A sound came through the phone. Small, almost like a laugh, but not quite the sound of someone who hasn't laughed easily in a long time. Almost doing it anyway. "I'll send you the briefing materials tomorrow," she said. "Good, Commander." "James," he said. Another pause. "James," she said. "Get some sleep." The Carter estate sat on 18 acres outside Halifax. And by the time James pulled up the long driveway on Saturday morning, there were already 30 cars parked along the side lawn, and the sound of a brass band warming up somewhere he couldn't see. He had worn the closest thing he owned to civilian formal dark slacks, a navy blue button-down no-tie, because he was an RCN officer, not a diplomat, and he had his limits. He had read the briefing materials Vivian sent. He knew who would be there. Her father, Howard Carter, 71, former Deputy Minister of National Defense, fading health, strong opinions. Her brother, Garrett, 40, charming in the way that people who've never been genuinely challenged tend to be charming. A collection of MPs, admirals, lobbyists, and family friends whose names he had memorized the same way he memorized port layouts before a mission. He had not in the briefing materials or in any of their 2 subsequent phone calls been told exactly how Vivian planned to introduce him. He would realize later that she hadn't told him on purpose. He got out of the car, walked toward the front entrance. The door was opened by a man in a white jacket who said nothing and gestured inward, and James stepped into a house that cost more than his entire career's accumulated salary, and immediately spotted Vivian across the entrance hall, speaking to a white-haired man with the bearing of someone who had once held authority and hadn't fully accepted that it had passed. Her father, Vivian, saw James. Something in her expression shifted. Not relief exactly, more like the click of a plan. Moving into the next phase. She crossed the room toward him. Around them, conversations continued. People moved between rooms carrying drinks, laughing at things that weren't quite jokes. She reached him. He opened his mouth to say good morning, and she took his hand. He went absolutely still. She laced her fingers through his naturally without hesitation. The way you do with someone whose hand you have held 100 times, turned toward the room and said it loud enough for everyone within 15 feet to hear. Everyone, this is James, my boyfriend. The silence that followed was not a silence. It was the sound of 50 people simultaneously stopping all other sounds and replacing them with the specific frequency of collective shock. Howard Carter sat down his drink. Garrett, standing near the fireplace, went so still he looked like a photograph of himself. An MP's wife leaned toward her husband. A retired admiral blinked twice. Someone's champagne glass stopped halfway to their lips. James did not move. He did not look at Vivian. He looked at the room, at the 50 faces turning toward him, with expressions that ranged from genuine surprise to barely concealed suspicion to the sharp calculating interest of people who understood immediately that something significant I had just shifted, and he did what he had trained himself to do in every high-pressure moment of the last 15 years. He steadied his breathing. He relaxed his jaw. He let his face settle into something that was calm and certain and gave away nothing at all. He was an RCN commander. He had been shot at in 3 countries. He could survive a family barbecue. James Calloway, he said, and extended his free hand, his left hand, because his right was still locked in Vivian's grip, toward the nearest person, who happened to be a Nova Scotia MLA with a red face and a handshake like a vice. Good to meet you, the MLA pumped his hand. And you as well. How long have you and Vivian? Long enough, Vivian said pleasantly, and the way she said it closed the question without answering it, which James recognized as a skill he respected. And then Howard Carter moved. He came across the room with the careful deliberateness of a man whose body had started to betray him, but who refused to let it show in his pace, and he stopped in front of James and looked at him, not with hostility, with the particular assessment of a man who had spent 50 years judging other men, and was not prepared to stop doing it, because his daughter was holding someone's hand. Commander Calloway, Howard said. So, he already knew the name, already knew the rank. Sir, James said. Military instinct. He didn't regret it. Something in Howard's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but James had spent his career reading imperceptible shifts. Vivian tells me, you're posted to the base here, Howard said. Yes, sir. Navy. Yes, sir. My father was Navy, Howard said. James waited. He would have called you a lifer, Howard continued. He meant it as a compliment. So, do I take it? James said. A pause. Howard studied him. Then he held out his hand. James shook it. And across the room, he caught Garrett watching no longer a photograph of himself, but something tighter and more controlled. The expression of a man who has been surprised and has decided very quickly that he will not be surprised again. The barbecue had begun, and somewhere across town, Lily was explaining to Captain why they were staying at Margaret's for the weekend. And Captain, according to Lily, was being very understanding about it. The first hour was navigation. James had studied tactics since he was 22 years old. He understood the architecture of pressure, where it was applied, how it moved, what a room looked like when the goal was to make someone feel small without ever saying anything that could be quoted. He had walked into hostile territories before. He had never walked into one wearing someone's hand. Vivian kept her grip easy but constant. Not performing connecting, he realized. She touched his arm when she wanted his attention. She included him in conversations naturally without the mechanical feel of someone executing a script. She was, he had to admit, extraordinarily good at this. But he was also watching Garrett. Garrett Carter was charming. That was the right word. He had the easy laugh and the inclusive eye contact and the particular gift for making everyone he spoke to feel briefly like the most important person in the room. James had known men like that in the military, men who understood instinctively that charm was a tool, that warmth could be deployed and retracted, that likability was a resource to be managed. He watched Garrett work the room. He watched the way Garrett steered conversations, always looping back to Howard, to legacy, to stability, to what the company needed in the next chapter. All of it pointing subtly and persistently at the same target. At Vivian, at the absence he was trying to make the room see when they looked at her. "He's been doing this for 2 years," Vivian said quietly when they were briefly alone near the edge of the garden. She was holding a glass of sparkling water and watching her brother talk to a man James had identified from the briefing materials as a board member. "He's good," James said. "He is," she agreed. There was no bitterness in it, just honesty. "But he's overconfident. James said he didn't expect you to walk in with someone. That surprised him. And he doesn't surprise easily, which means he's already recalibrating. That's going to cost him something speed probably. He'll be slower for the rest of the day." Vivian looked at him sideways. "You got all that from 20 minutes of watching him at a barbecue." "I got all that from 20 minutes of watching him at a barbecue," James confirmed. Another one of those almost laughs. He was starting to recognize them. They were the sound of her deciding each time whether the moment was safe enough to let something real come through. "What do we do?" she asked. "We don't do anything dramatic," he said. "Not yet. We let the day move. We let your father form an opinion on his own." He looked at Howard across the lawn. The old man was watching them, even from a distance, always watching. "He's testing me." "That's fair. Let him. And if Garrett moves first, then we let him move first," James said. "And we watch what he moves toward." Vivian was quiet for a moment. "You're different than I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "Someone more performative, more eager to prove himself." "I don't need to prove myself to anyone at this party." "No," she said, and something in her voice had changed, quieter, more private. "I know. That's what I mean." He looked at her. She looked away back toward the garden, toward Garrett, and the board member toward her father, toward the careful architecture of her family, that her brother was trying to dismantle brick by brick. "Come on," she said. "My aunt wants to meet you, and she will ask you extremely personal questions, and I need you to know that she means well." "How personal?" "She will ask if you want more children within the first 3 minutes." He absorbed that. "Does she mean well?" he asked. "Gigi, genuinely," Vivian said. "She's just enthusiastic." "All right," he straightened. "Let's go." They walked back toward the house together, her hand finding his arm again. Easy and natural. And James Calloway, single father, widower, commander, man who had been awake since 3:15 this morning, walked into a family he had never met, carrying a story that was not entirely true, feeling for reasons he could not have explained that something about this day was going to change things. He didn't know which things yet. He didn't know how far the change would go, but he had learned a long time ago to trust the feeling. The brass band had started playing. The sun was climbing, and somewhere inside the house, Garrett Carter was recalibrating. James let go of nothing, gave away nothing, and waited. Vivian's aunt was named Dorothy, and she was 73 years old. Wore a yellow dress that cost more than most people's rent, and had the energy of a woman who had decided sometime around her 50th birthday that social filters were for people with less interesting things to say. She took one look at James, grabbed both of his hands in hers, and said, "Oh, Vivian, finally. Aunt Dorothy, don't Aunt Dorothy me. I've been watching you work yourself into an early grave for 6 years, and I've been saying to your father, I've been saying, Howard, that girl needs someone real, not another man who's going to spend dinner talking about quarterly projections." She turned to James without releasing his hands. "You're not going to talk about quarterly projections at dinner, are you?" "No, ma'am," James said. "Good, Vivian. This one has manners." She studied his face the way a jeweler examines a stone. Close, systematic, looking for flaws. "Military, Navy, commander. My third husband was Air Force," Dorothy said with the particular tone of someone who considers this information both relevant and not entirely complimentary to the Royal Canadian Air Force. "You seem steadier than he was." Gerald could never sit still. Always had to be doing something. You ever have that problem? I've been told I have the opposite problem, James said. Dorothy laughed. A real one, the full-body kind. I like him, she announced to no one, and everyone simultaneously. Vivian. I like him. I know, Vivian said. That was never in question. You know what was in question. Dorothy released James's hands and pointed a ringed finger at her niece. Whether you'd ever bring anyone home at all. Your brother has been going around telling everyone you're. She lowered her voice to a stage whisper that carried approximately 15 feet in every direction. Married to the company. Like that's something to be proud of. Vivian's expression didn't change. But James felt her hand tighten slightly on his arm, just a fraction, just for a second, and he shifted his weight almost imperceptibly close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, and the tightening stopped. She didn't look at him, but she didn't move away either. Garrett means well, Vivian said, and the way she said it was so clean and neutral that only someone listening for the lie would have found it. Garrett means Garrett, Dorothy said flatly. Always has, she waved a hand. Anyway, James, do you want children? More children. I should say, Vivian told me about your daughter, Lily. Yes, Aunt Dorothy. It's a reasonable question. It's the 3rd minute of the conversation. I'm 73. I don't have time for a long runway. She fixed James with an expectant look. James looked at Dorothy. He looked at Vivian, whose expression had developed the careful blankness of someone deeply regretting a life choice. He looked back at Dorothy. I think, he said slowly, that some questions are worth taking seriously before you answer them out loud. Dorothy stared at him. Then she turned to Vivian. He's very good, she said. I know, Vivian said. Keep him. I'm working on it, Vivian said. And it came out smoother than either of them had prepared for. And James had the particular experience of hearing someone tell a lie so well that it sounded for just a moment entirely like the truth. Dorothy moved on. She was the kind of woman who moved like weather arriving, filling every space, departing before you'd fully adjusted to her presence. James watched her cross the lawn toward a group of people who immediately began looking both delighted and slightly alarmed. She's wonderful, he said. She's a Category 5 hurricane in yellow chiffon. Vivian said those aren't mutually exclusive. Vivian almost said something, stopped herself. He noticed and said nothing about it, which he understood was the correct choice. They moved back into the main flow of the party. The afternoon had its own architecture, and James mapped it the way he mapped everything, identifying the pressure points, the sight lines, the places where a conversation could go wrong, and the places where it was designed to go wrong. Garrett was the center of it. He wasn't obvious about it. That was the thing about Garrett Carter. Nothing he did was obvious because obvious was inefficient. He moved through the party like he was simply enjoying himself, laughing at the right moments, touching his father's arm with the kind of casual affection that looked natural, but was precisely timed, steering every interaction back toward the same invisible architecture. Howard was the audience. Everyone else was the set. James tracked it for 2 hours without saying anything to Vivian about it because what he needed first was the full picture, not a reaction. What he got by mid-afternoon was this. Garrett had spoken privately with 4 board members. Each conversation lasted between 7 and 12 minutes, short enough to seem casual, long enough to accomplish something. 2 of those conversations had included glances toward James and Vivian. One had ended with the board member nodding slowly in the way people nod when they've been told something that reframes what they already thought they knew. Howard had watched all 4 conversations without appearing to watch them, and Garrett at no point had approached James directly. That was the tell. A man who was confident in his position would have come over, would have been warm, welcoming the gracious host, who made his sister's new boyfriend feel included. The fact that Garrett hadn't, the fact that he was maintaining his distance, observing, not yet engaging, meant he was still gathering information, which meant he wasn't ready to move yet, which meant James had time. He found Howard Carter standing alone near the edge of the garden, holding a glass of something amber, looking out over the lawn with the focused abstraction of a man going over old accounts. James had not planned this. He thought about it for approximately 4 seconds, weighed it, and then walked over. Sir Howard turned. If he was surprised, he didn't show it. "Commander, mind if I stand here for a minute?" Howard gestured at the open space beside him. James stood there. They didn't speak for almost 30 seconds, which was long by party standards, and entirely comfortable by the standards of two men who had spent significant portions of their lives in situations where silence was the safest thing. "How long have you known my daughter?" Howard asked finally. Not accusatory, just direct. "Too long enough to know she's the most capable person in any room she walks into," James said. "And the last person to say so herself." Howard looked at him sideways. "That's a good answer. It's the true answer. Those aren't always the same thing." "No," James agreed. "But they should be." Howard took a drink, set the glass down on the stone ledge beside him. "She works too hard," he said. And there was something in it that was just a father, just a man who was worried about his daughter and didn't have a clean way to say it. "She works hard because she cares about what she's built," James said. "That's different from working too hard. She's alone." "She's not," James said simply. Howard looked at him. James held it. The old man's expression was unreadable in the way that faces are unreadable when they're in the middle of deciding something important. His eyes moved over James with the same systematic assessment James had seen from the moment they'd been introduced. Measuring, comparing, running some private calculation. "My wife worked herself into the ground for this company," Howard said quietly. "I told myself she loved it, that it was what she wanted. She died at 62. He paused. "I don't want that for Vivian." James took a moment before he answered because the moment deserved one. "She's not going to," he said. "She's smarter than that, and she has people around her who won't let it happen." Howard was quiet. "I'm one of them," James said. Not a performance, just a statement of fact about a thing he had decided in that moment to make true. Howard picked up his glass. He took a long look at James, a final look, the kind you take when you're closing a ledger. Then he nodded. Once small but real, and James understood that he had just passed something that mattered more than any of the board members, the MPs, or the carefully staged interactions of the afternoon. He excused himself quietly and went to find Vivian. He found her in the hallway just inside the French doors, speaking in a low, even voice to her brother. Or rather, Garrett was speaking and Vivian was listening with the careful stillness of someone who has learned that controlled silence is more powerful than any response. James stopped just outside the doorway. He didn't announce himself. He listened, just trying to make sure you understand what Monday looks like, Garrett was saying. His voice was pleasant, conversational, like he was discussing a scheduling conflict. "Dad's already spoken to 3 of the board members. They have concerns. Viv. Real ones. And I hate to say it, but bringing a small pause, a date to Canada Day, isn't going to change what they see when they look at your situation." "My situation," Vivian said. "Your life. The way you live it." He sounded almost sorry about it. "Almost. You're brilliant, Viv. Everyone knows that, but leadership isn't just competence, it's stability," she said. "Yes. Emotional grounding. Yes. A personal life that reassures the people writing the checks." Her voice was still even, still steady. But James, standing in the doorway, could hear the thin line of something underneath it. Not anger. Not hurt. Something more controlled than either. The sound of a person who has been managing their own reaction for so long, it has become physiological. "I know this isn't what you want to hear," Garrett said. "No," she agreed. "What I want to hear is why you've spent the last 2 years building this conversation instead of having it honestly." A silence. "I don't know what you mean," Garrett said. "Yes, you do," she said quietly. "You know exactly what I mean, Garrett. But this isn't the right place for it, and you know that, too." James stepped through the doorway. Garrett saw him immediately. His expression reset faster than most people could manage, but not faster than James, who watched the specific muscle movement around his eyes that happened when someone recalibrates their face intentionally. "James," Garrett said, and extended a hand. His grip was firm and dry and held exactly one beat too long. "I was wondering when we'd get a chance to talk." "I've been wondering the same thing," James said pleasantly. Something flickered in Garrett's eyes. "I hear you're posted to the base here." "Naval Command." "That's right. My father respects that. He respects military service." "A beat. How long have you and Vivian been?" "Long enough," James said, and the echo of Vivian's earlier phrase was entirely deliberate, and from the tiny shift in Garrett's posture, he registered it. "Of course." Garrett smiled. "Well, we'll have more time to get acquainted at dinner. I want to hear about your work." He looked between them, one of those looks that seemed inclusive and was designed to isolate. "I'll let you two get back to the party." He moved past them unhurried, still smiling, and James watched him go. "He's going to make a move tonight," James said quietly once Garrett was beyond hearing. Vivian exhaled. "What makes you say that?" "He's ahead of schedule, which means he's nervous, and nervous people accelerate." James watched Garrett rejoin the party, slip immediately into conversation with two people James hadn't fully assessed yet. "Who's he talking to?" Vivian looked, her jaw tightened slightly. "Richard Falk. He controls 2 board seats. And the woman next to him is his wife, Karen. She has her father's proxy vote." A pause. "That's effectively 3 votes. How many does Garrett need to move the board?" 5. "He has 2 solid. If he gets Falk, then he needs 2 more." James said tonight. "Yes." James looked at the party, at the MPs and the admirals, and the old money and the new money, and the people who had known the Carter family for 40 years. And the people who had known them for 4 months and were trying to look like they'd known them for 40. He looked at Howard across the lawn, now talking to Dorothy, who appeared to be demonstrating something with her hands that involved considerable dramatic range. He looked at Vivian. She was watching her brother, and her face for just a moment in the unguarded space between one breath and the next was the face of someone who was very tired and absolutely refusing to let it stop her. He had seen that face before. He saw it in the mirror every morning at 4:47 a.m. "I need to make a phone call," he said. She looked at him. "To who?" "My daughter." He checked his watch. "She'll be having dinner at Margaret's. I promised I'd check in." Something shifted in Vivian's expression. "Small. Private." She looked away quickly. "Of course, I'll come with me," he said. She blinked. "What?" "Come with me," he said again. "I call her every evening. It's not a long call, but I'd like you to." He paused. The honest reason and the tactical reason were the same reason for once, which made it easier to say. "She knows I'm working this weekend. I'd like her to hear that I'm okay, and I think it would be good for her to hear another voice." Vivian stared at him for a moment. "James, I don't want to intrude on." "You're not intruding," he said. "I'm asking." A long pause. "Okay," she said quietly. They found a corner of the back terrace that was temporarily empty, and James called Margaret's number and put it on speaker. Lily answered on the second ring. "Dad." "Hey, Bud. How's Margaret's?" "Good. We made snickerdoodles. I put in extra cinnamon because Margaret said I could be the boss of the cinnamon, and I took that seriously." "That sounds like a lot of cinnamon." "It was the right amount," Lily said firmly. "How's your work thing?" He looked at Vivian, who was standing slightly apart, looking at the sky, giving him space she didn't quite know he didn't need. "It's going well. I wanted you to say hello to someone." A pause. "Someone, her name is Vivian." He said she's the word colleague Rose, and he let it go. "She's someone I'm helping out this weekend. She's good people." "Okay," Lily said with the careful neutrality of a 7-year-old processing new information. He looked at Vivian and tilted the phone toward her. Vivian hesitated, then stepped closer. "Hi, Lily," she said. A silence. "Hi," Lily said. "Do you have any kids?" "Lily," James started. "It's a reasonable question," Lily said with an intonation that was clearly borrowed from somewhere. And James realized with a jolt that it was Dorothy's intonation, except that Lily had no way of knowing that, which meant she had arrived at the same phrasing independently, which said something he wasn't going to examine right now. Vivian made a sound. Something genuine, almost startled. No, she said. I don't. Do you like kids? Yes, I think so. My dad's good with kids. Lily said he's good with most things, actually. He's not that good at fixing stuff around the house, but he's good at the important stuff. Lily, James said. It's true, she said unapologetically. Vivian is my dad being helpful. Vivian looked at James. Her expression was something he had not seen on her face before. Open, surprised, almost undefended. Yes, she said. He really is good. Lily seemed satisfied. Tell him to come home safe. I will, Vivian said softly. And tell Captain High if you meet him. He's a rabbit. He's staying with me. He has opinions. I'll look forward to meeting him, Vivian said, and her voice had something in it that James could not name, a warmth that was real and slightly raw. The kind that comes out when someone is caught off guard by something they didn't expect to feel. He took the phone back. Okay, bud. Be good for Margaret. I love you too, Lily said. Bye, Vivian. Bye, Lily, Vivian said. The call ended. They stood there for a moment in the quiet of the terrace. Vivian was looking at the phone, or at the space where the phone had been, or at something else entirely. Her hands were folded in front of her, and her breathing was careful in the way it gets when someone is making it careful on purpose. She's extraordinary, Vivian said finally. Yeah, James said. She is. She's so. Vivian stopped, started again. She sounds like someone who has been loved very well. The words landed softly, but they landed deep. Claire was a remarkable mother, he said, quiet. Even Lily carries that. Vivian nodded. She didn't ask more. She understood he thought the difference between a door that's open and a door that you just acknowledge is there. Thank you, she said, for letting me hear her. Thank you, he said, and he meant it for reasons he didn't fully have words for yet. She straightened. The open look closed back into competence. Not falsely, not as armor, just as the things she wore when there was work to do. We should go back in. Dinner's in an hour. Yes, he said. They went back to the party. Dinner was inside at a long table that seated 32, and had clearly been arranged to put specific people next to specific people in ways that were not accidental. James found his seat next to Vivian, across from a retired admiral named Prescott, 2 seats down from Howard, and understood immediately that the table was a stage, and the seating chart was directorial. Garrett was at the far end, which meant he controlled that end of the conversation. Howard was at the head, which meant he was meant to observe both ends, and James was in the middle, which meant he considered this, that he was meant to be looked at, assessed, evaluated by people on all sides. He was fine with that. He had been evaluated before. The first 40 minutes of dinner were the slow build, the kind of social movement that looks like pleasant conversation and operates as something entirely more deliberate. Prescott asked James about his service record with the careful specificity of someone who had already been briefed on it and was checking his answers against known information. James answered honestly, completely without elaboration, because he had learned that the most disarming thing you could do when someone was testing you was to give them nothing to catch. Vivian talked to her father about the company, not defensively, not with the energy of someone justifying themselves, but with the easy authority of someone discussing work. They genuinely understood. James listened with half his attention and tracked Garrett with the other half. Garrett was telling a story at his end of the table. Something about a golf trip. Everyone was laughing. He was charming. He was wonderful. And every few minutes he looked at James, not at Vivian, at James. He was trying to read him, trying to find the scene in the performance, the place where the story didn't hold the tell that proved this whole thing was constructed. James gave him nothing. He talked to Prescott. He answered Howard's questions about Lily. Howard asked 3, which was more than James expected, and they were real questions, not social ones. He ate his food. He was present. He was entirely, completely, boringly genuine, and that he understood was the most effective thing he could be. It was the dessert course when Garrett moved. He did it so smoothly that James almost admired it. I have to say, Garrett said, raising his voice just enough to carry the length of the table. It's wonderful to see Vivian so happy. He smiled down the table at her. She's been carrying so much for so long. We've all been worried. We have, Dorothy said immediately, which James suspected Garrett had not anticipated. Worried how? Vivian asked, her voice light. Just Garrett made an expansive gesture. You know, the isolation of the job. Dad and I were talking just last week about whether you were getting enough. I wasn't, Howard said. Everyone looked at Howard. He set down his spoon, looked at his son with the unhurried authority of a man who had run boardrooms for 40 years. I don't believe I said that, Garrett. A silence. Dad, we were talking about the board's concerns regarding— I know what the board's concerns are, Howard said. I'm aware of all of them. I'm also aware that this is Canada Day and your sister is at this table, and it is not the time for a board discussion. He said it pleasantly. He said it the way you say something that ends a conversation so completely that attempting to continue it would simply reveal you hadn't understood it. Then he looked at James. Commander Calloway. You were telling me earlier that you have a daughter. Does she enjoy Canada Day? And just like that, the table turned. James took one breath, smooth, unnoticeable, and said, She does. She's obsessed with sparklers. Last year, she stayed outside until 2200 waving one around. And when I finally brought her in, she had a perfect circle burned into her sneaker, and she was deeply proud of it. Laughter, real laughter. The retired admiral, Dorothy, the MP's wife, even two of the board members, and Howard Carter at the head of the table allowed himself a small smile that was entirely genuine. James did not look at Garrett, but he felt him. The particular silence of a man who has watched a room move away from him, and understands that he cannot in this moment move it back. After dinner, when the party had softened into its later, looser hours, James stepped outside to the back terrace while Vivian talked to Dorothy. He needed 10 minutes of genuine quiet, the kind where no one needed anything from him, where he could just stand and breathe and let his mind process what the day had given him. He stood there looking out at the dark lawn. He thought about Lily, probably asleep by now, at Margaret's captain tucked under her chin. He thought about the ceiling fan. He thought about Claus' flag on the bookshelf and Lily wanting to bring it to school and the way his daughter had said the important stuff on the phone with such casual certainty, as if it were simply a known fact about him that she had no doubt about at all. He's good with the important stuff. He had not felt like that in a long time. Not bad at it. He had never felt bad at it, but certain about it, clear about it. The way you feel when someone says the true thing out loud, and it reaches you before you can decide how to react to it. You're thinking hard, Vivian said. He turned. She had come out quietly holding 2 glasses of water, and she handed him one. Thank you. You don't have to tell me what about. I know. She stood beside him. They, Clear's throat, looked at the lawn. Somewhere in the distance, someone had started early fireworks illegal, probably, and entirely predictable for Canada Day. And you could hear the low percussion of them far off irregular. He's going to try again tomorrow, she said. The morning before everyone leaves. I know. Are you ready for that? He thought about it honestly. I need to find something first, he said. I need to understand what exactly he's been doing with Falk. What he offered him or what he promised him or what he's using. He paused. I don't think it's clean. Vivian turned to look at him. What do you mean? I mean, a man who's confident in a legitimate argument doesn't need to work this hard to stack the room before the vote. James looked at her. He's been meeting with defense suppliers, the ones we've been reviewing for the military contract renewals. A pause. I've seen some of the paperwork on our end. There are procurement irregularities that we flagged 6 weeks ago. Vivian went still, very, very still. How significant? She asked. I don't know yet, he said. But if Garrett has a financial relationship with the supplier that he hasn't disclosed to the board, then he's not just trying to take the company. Vivian said quietly. He's trying to take it before anyone asks why he's been so interested in that particular supplier. She exhaled. James. I know that's not a board fight anymore. No, he said it's not. They stood there in the dark with the distant sound of illegal fireworks coming through the warm night air, and James understood that the thing he'd walked into on Saturday morning had shifted into something with edges and weight and real consequence. He was okay with that. He had always been better when the stakes were real. Tomorrow morning, he said, let me make some calls tonight. I have a contact at the procurement office who can pull the flagged filings. He looked at her. If there's something there, we'll have it before breakfast. Vivian looked at him, and for a moment the competent CEO, and the exhausted daughter, and the woman who had almost laughed 3 times today were all visible at once, layered over each other. No one version fully in front. Why are you doing this? She asked. Not challenging, genuinely asking. He thought about the honest answer, found it. Because it's right, he said. And because your brother is exactly the kind of man I've been fighting my whole career, just in different clothes. She held his gaze for a long time. Then she looked back at the lawn and the distant fireworks and the long, dark stretch of a holiday that had become something neither of them had planned. Get some sleep, she said finally. Tomorrow's going to be hard. I know, he said. James. Her voice was quiet now, and careful, and said something his name didn't say. Thank you for today, for all of it. He nodded once, and they stood there a moment longer in the warm, dark, 2 people at the edge of something that had begun as a plan, and was quietly, steadily becoming something else, something neither of them had a name for yet, and neither of them was ready to name. The fireworks continued, small and distant, and entirely undeterred by the lateness of the hour. The morning would come, and when it did, James Calloway would be ready. He made the calls at midnight. Vivian had given him a guest room at the end of the east hallway, quiet, removed from the main house, the kind of room that had clearly been decorated by someone with excellent taste and no personal attachment to it. He sat on the edge of the bed in the dark with his phone, and called a man named Carl Daring. Carl Daring was a senior procurement analyst at the Department of National Defense who had served 2 years under James's command in Bahrain, and who owed him by both their counts something in the neighborhood of 4 significant favors. Carl answered on the 3rd ring, which meant he was awake, which meant James was not the only one who had noticed the irregularities. I was wondering when you'd call, Carl said. You've been looking at the Vantage Group filings, James said. Not a question. Flagged them 6 weeks ago. Sent the report up the chain. Haven't heard a word back, which tells you something. Tell me what you have, Carl told him. It took 22 minutes, and by the end of it, James was standing at the window very still, the way he got when something large and clear-edged came into focus. Vantage Defense Supply Group had received 3 contract modifications in the past 14 months. Modifications that redirected approximately $47 million in component procurement away from the original certified vendors and toward Vantage's subsidiary network. The modifications had been approved through a secondary authorization channel that bypassed the standard oversight committee, and the authorization signatures on 2 of the 3 modifications traced back to a consulting agreement between Vantage's parent company and a private equity vehicle called Crestbridge Holdings. Crestbridge Holdings had been incorporated in Toronto 14 months ago. Its sole registered agent was a law firm in Ottawa. Its beneficial owner had not been publicly disclosed. Can you get me the beneficial owner? James asked. Already tried, Carl said. It's layered shell inside a shell. But a pause, the particular pause of someone who has more to say and is deciding how much of it is safe to say over a phone line. I pulled Vantage's executive hospitality records, the ones they're required to disclose for federal contractor compliance. There are 4 entries in the last 18 months for meetings at a private club in Ottawa. High-end, the kind of place that doesn't put its name on a business card. And the guest listed on all 4 entries is a G. Carter. Another pause. Initial only. Could be anyone. Could be, James said. Except the dates line up with Carter Defense Technologies board planning cycles. Specifically the cycles in Q4 of last year and Q1 of this year. Carl's voice was level professional. I'm not making an accusation, James. I'm giving you a pattern. The pattern is enough, James said. Can you send me the filings, the hospitality records? I can send you what's public record, the rest, the public record is enough. Send it to my secure email. A silence on the line. James, what are you doing? Making sure the right person is in the right seat, James said. Nothing more than that. Carl exhaled. Watch yourself. Always do. He hung up. Stood at the window for another few minutes. The house was quiet around him, the particular quiet of a large house in the deep hours when even its systems seemed to hold their breath. He thought about what he had. It wasn't a smoking gun. Not yet. What it was a pattern precise, documented, corroborated by federal disclosure records that any competent board would look at and immediately understand, and more importantly, that any federal investigator would immediately understand. The question was how to use it. He thought about the morning, about Garrett at the breakfast table moving toward the final piece of his play, about Howard Carter, who had nodded once that afternoon. Small reel, closing a ledger about Vivian standing on the terrace in the dark, every version of herself visible at once. He sat back down on the edge of the bed. He didn't sleep for a long time. When he did, he was still thinking about the pattern. The house began moving at 0700. James was already dressed, and in the hallway at 0640, which meant he heard the staff arriving in the kitchen, heard the coffee equipment starting, heard the particular series of sounds that a large house makes when it is preparing itself to be occupied again. He had slept 4 hours, not enough for most people, more than enough for him. He found Vivian in the small sitting room off the kitchen. She was there before anyone else, dressed simply, no performance in it, holding a coffee cup with both hands and reading something on her phone. She looked up when he came in. One look at his face. You found something, she said. He sat down across from her and told her. He gave it to her the same way Carl had given it to him. Clean, sequential. No editorializing. Just the documented shape of it. She listened without interrupting, which he had already come to expect. She was that kind of thinker, the kind who needs the complete picture before she speaks. Not because she's slow, but because she's precise. When he finished, she set down her coffee cup. Crestbridge Holdings, she said. Yes, he incorporated it 14 months ago. That's when the first contract modification was filed. She was quiet. Processing the timeline the way you process a map. Not just the points, but the distances between them, the routes, the deliberate choices of direction. He's been building this, she said. At the same time, he's been building the board play. Yes, they're connected. The board play gives him control of the company. Control of the company gives him influence over future contract decisions. And the consulting arrangement with Vantage means he already has a financial stake in the outcome of those decisions. Vivian finished. It's not just a power grab. He's been monetizing access he doesn't legitimately have yet. She looked at James. Her eyes were steady and very dark. That's not a family dispute. That's a federal crime. Multiple federal crimes, James said, depending on how the authorization signatures were obtained. He would have needed someone inside the oversight process. Yes. Someone who trusted him, or owed him. She paused. Or was afraid of him. They sat with that for a moment. We need to go to the board with this before he moves this morning, James said. Not as an accusation, as a disclosure. You present the documents. You let the pattern speak for itself. And you make clear that you've already been in contact with someone in the federal procurement oversight chain. He paused. That last part matters. It signals that this is beyond the family, beyond the board. He can't contain it. Vivian looked at him. If we do this at breakfast, he loses his window. He needs the board vote Monday. If the board members understand that a federal review is already in motion, they won't vote to install someone who might be under investigation. They can't afford to. He'll know it was me who surfaced it. Yes, he'll say, I manufactured it. That I planted it to stop the vote. The documents are federal disclosure records, James said. They predate this weekend. They predate you knowing I was going to make those calls. The timeline is clean. He held her gaze. He can say whatever he wants. The paper is the paper. She breathed in. Out. My father, she said. This is going to. She stopped. He built this company with Garrett. He loves him. I know. This is going to break something in him. I know that, too. James leaned forward. Elbows on his knees. Voice level. But the alternative is letting it break differently, slower, worse, with the company compromised and federal investigators arriving 6 months from now without any warning and without anyone in the family having had the chance to respond first. He paused. Your father is a harder man than you're giving him credit for. He built something real. He can handle a real conversation about what's been done to it. Vivian looked at him for a long time. You're certain, she said. I'm certain about the documents, he said. I'm certain about the pattern. I'm certain that doing nothing this morning is the worst choice. He paused. I'm not certain how it lands. I'm never certain how it lands, but I know what the right thing is. She closed her eyes just for a second. When she opened them, something had settled in her face. Not peace, not relief, but the particular clarity of a decision made. Okay, she said, okay. Walk me through the breakfast, she said. How does this go? Menting. Breakfast was at 0830. The same 32 people minus a few guests who had departed the night before, plus coffee and pastries and the loosened mood of a holiday morning. The fireworks would be tonight, the official ones, the community display over the bay that the Carter family had watched from this property for 30 years. James sat where he had sat the night before. He watched Garrett arrive. Garrett came in looking rested. That was the thing. He genuinely looked rested, which meant he had slept well. Which meant he was confident in his morning. Which meant he had already decided how it was going to go. He poured coffee. He kissed his father on the cheek. He made a joke to Dorothy that made her laugh against her will. He was in the ordinary light of a Sunday morning entirely likable. James ate his breakfast and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Richard Falk arrived at 0840 and made his way toward Howard Carter with the purposeful casualness of someone executing a prearranged plan. James watched Falk say something to Howard, quiet, private, leaning in, and watched Howard's expression shift into something more formal, more alert. Whatever Falk said had been prepared. It had the shape of prepared language. Vivian saw it, too. He felt her go still beside him. It's starting, she said under her breath. Let it start, he said the same way. Garrett moved to his father's side. Falk stepped back slightly, yielding the space, and Garrett said something to Howard that James couldn't hear, but whose architecture he could read from across the room. The posture, the gesture, the particular way Garrett placed one hand on his father's arm that said, "This is between us. This is family. This is care." Howard looked at Vivian, and Vivian stood up. She did it quietly without announcement, the way you stand up when you've decided. She picked up a folded set of papers from beside her plate, the documents James had printed from his secure email on the sitting room printer at 0600, and she walked across the room toward her father. The room noticed. The room always noticed Vivian Carter moving with purpose because she had learned somewhere along the way to move as if she owned the floor she was standing on. And in this house on this morning, she did. "Dad," she said before we continue, "I need you to look at something." Garrett's expression did the reset faster this time, tighter. "Vivian." He started. I'm talking to Dad," she said. Not loud, not sharp, just clear in the way that a line drawn on a map is clear. She handed the papers to Howard. He took them. He looked at the top page. Then he looked at his daughter, and then at his son, and then back at the papers with the expression of a man who has just understood that the conversation he thought he was about to have is not the conversation he is actually in. "What is this?" Howard asked. "Federal procurement disclosure records," Vivian said, "and hospitality filings from Vantage Defense Supply Group." I'd like you to read them before anyone says anything else this morning. Vivian, Garrett said, and now his voice had an edge in it, still controlled, still within the register of reasonable, but with something underneath it that James recognized as the sound of a plan encountering unexpected resistance. Whatever you think you found, Garrett. Howard's voice, quiet, absolute. Garrett stopped. Howard, read. The room had gone very quiet, not the shock quiet of the first morning when Vivian had introduced James, and everything had frozen in surprise. This was a different kind of quiet, heavier, with more awareness of what it meant. The board members who were present had the carefully neutral faces of people who understood they were watching something consequential, and were making real-time decisions about how much to visibly react. Richard Falk was very still. Howard read for 4 minutes. He turned pages slowly and with great care, the way he did everything, and no one in the room spoke or moved with any significance, and the only sounds were the distant clink of someone setting down a coffee cup, and outside a bird starting and stopping. When he finished, he set the papers down on the table beside him. He did not look at Garrett. He looked at James. Commander Calloway, Howard said. Do you know where these documents came from? Federal Procurement Disclosure Database, James said. Public record. I contacted a Department of National Defense procurement analyst last night. He confirmed the filings and the timeline and the hospitality records. Also, public record required disclosure for federal contractors. Howard nodded slowly, the nod of a man closing something he had not expected to have to close. Then, he turned to his son. Garrett was still standing, still managing his face. James had to concede extraordinary at managing his face. There was still a version of reasonableness in his expression. Still a version of, let me explain this, that might have worked on a different kind of man at a different kind of moment. But Howard Carter was not a different kind of man. Garrett, Howard said. His voice had no anger in it. No betrayal, no accusation, just the particular flatness of a man who has arrived at the end of something. I'm going to ask you once, and I want you to understand that I am asking you as your father, not as anyone else. Do you have a financial interest in Vantage Defense Supply Group or any of its subsidiaries? The room held. Garrett looked at his father. He looked at Vivian. He looked at the papers in Howard's hands. He made the calculation James could see him making. It could see the moment he assessed the room and understood that the calculation did not come out in his favor. It's more complicated than it looks, Garrett said. Howard stood up. He picked up the papers. He handed them to Richard Falk. Richard, he said, I think we need to postpone Monday's agenda. What happened next took 3 hours and was in its own way as precise as anything James had planned. Falk read the documents. He passed them to the other board members present. Garrett spoke at length, and with the particular eloquence of someone who has spent his whole life knowing how to talk a room into a position. But the documents were the documents, and the timeline was the timeline, and the more he explained, the more the shape of it became clear to the people in the room who understood these things. Howard asked questions, Vivian answered them, and James answered the technical procurement questions. And twice, Garrett's answers were directly contradicted by the dates on the disclosure filings. And each time that happened, something in Falk's expression closed a little further. By 1100, Falk had made 2 phone calls from the hallway. James didn't know who he called. He could guess. By noon, Howard Carter had asked Garrett to wait for him in the study. By 12:30 of the 4 board members present had quietly asked Vivian for copies of the documents. It was not an explosion. It was not a dramatic confrontation. It was something more like the slow, inevitable clearing of a sky after a long storm. Not dramatic, just thorough. The light coming back without announcement. James stood with Vivian on the edge of it all. And he watched it resolve the way all the best tactical outcomes resolved. Not with a dramatic moment, but with accumulated, documented, irreversible truth. It's done, Vivian said quietly. Not triumphant. Careful the way you are when you understand that the winning has costs. The federal side isn't done, James said. Carl's team will follow up. There'll be an investigation. I know. A pause. My father is in there with him right now, James said. And whatever that conversation is, it's between them. You gave him what he needed to have it honestly. She looked toward the closed study door. Her expression was the complicated thing that faces become when there's love and grief and relief all pressing on the same place at once. He's still my brother, she said. I know that doesn't. She stopped. I didn't want this. I know that too, James said. He said it simply because it was simply true and she needed it to be said simply rather than surrounded by the scaffolding of comfort. But you did the right thing. Those are different. She looked at him. They are different, she said. That doesn't make it feel like it. No, he agreed. It doesn't. They stood there for a moment, two people on the other side of something in the particular quiet that follows when a necessary thing has been done. Dorothy appeared from somewhere and put her arms around Vivian without saying a word, which was James thought the most remarkable thing Dorothy had done all weekend, and it was remarkably right. He stepped back to give them space. He went and found coffee. He sat in the small sitting room where he and Vivian had talked at 0640 that morning, and he sat with his coffee, and he thought about Lily waking up at Margaret's, probably demanding snickerdoodle breakfast, and narrating the opinions of a stuffed rabbit. He was tired. Not the operational kind of tired, where you push through and the adrenaline covers it. The other kind, the kind that reaches bone level, the kind that comes after you have spent 24 hours being precisely, completely fully yourself in a context that demanded everything you had. He didn't mind it. He had felt it before after long deployments, after difficult missions, after the years right after Claire died when every single day felt like a complete operation in itself. He knew this kind of tired. It was the kind that eventually became rest. His phone buzzed. A text from Lily. Margaret says, I can have leftover snickerdoodles for lunch if I eat something real first. What counts as real? He typed back. Something that wasn't baked in the last 12 hours. 3 seconds. That seems unfair, but okay. Are you coming home tonight? He looked around the sitting room, looked at the closed study door down the hall, looked at where Vivian was still standing with Dorothy's hand on her back. Both of them quiet. Yes, he typed. I'll be home for dinner. Okay. Captain says, drive safe. Tell Captain I will. He put the phone in his pocket. He sat with his coffee, and then Howard Carter walked out of the study. He walked past the sitting room, stopped when he saw James, looked at him for a long moment, the same assessment as always, but different now. Stripped of the part that was strategic, the part that was calculating, just a father looking at a man who had been in his house for 24 hours and had at some point during those hours done the thing that Howard had not been able to do himself. Commander, Howard said. Sir. Howard came into the sitting room. He didn't sit. He stood in the way that men of his generation stand when they have something to say that they have not fully organized into language yet but are going to say anyway because not saying it would be the wrong choice. I owe you something. Howard said. You don't. James said. I owe my daughter something. Howard said, and I owe you for being the person who made it possible for me to pay it. He looked at James steadily. I was wrong about the situation, not about wanting what was best for her, but about what that looked like and about who was actually protecting it. James looked at him. She was protecting it, he said. She's been protecting it. I just gave her the tools. Howard said. Yes, I know. A pause. That matters. James nodded. Howard extended his hand. James stood and shook it. Howard's grip was still firm, still the grip of a man who had run boardrooms, but there was something in it that was different from the handshake at the party. This one had no assessment in it at all, just acknowledgement. Man to man, clean. Dinner is ruined, obviously, Howard said, but Dorothy is already reorganizing the kitchen, and I suspect no one is leaving until she decides they can. He paused. Stay, please. James thought about Lily, about the text, about home for dinner. I have to get back, he said. My daughter. Howard nodded like he had expected it. Like it was, in fact, exactly the right answer. Of course. He moved toward the door, stopped. James. It was the first time Howard Carter had used his first name. Yes, sir. Take care of her, Howard said. Not because she needs it. She doesn't particularly, but because, he paused. Because everyone deserves someone who shows up. He left. James stood in the sitting room for a moment. Because everyone deserves someone who shows up. He picked up his coffee cup, set it down, went to find Vivian. She was in the hallway alone for the first time in hours, standing near the front door with her arms crossed and her eyes on the middle distance. He stopped beside her. "Your father talked to me," he said. She looked at him. "What did he say?" "That he owes you something and that he was wrong about what protecting you looked like." She was quiet. "That's..." She started, stopped. Her jaw was very tight, and her eyes were bright in the way. Eyes are bright when someone is holding something behind them with considerable effort. "That's a lot from him." "Yes," James said. "I think he means it." She nodded once small. "I need to go," he said. "I told Lily I'd be home for dinner." Vivian looked at him, and the thing that crossed her face then was complicated. He watched it move through her the way things move through people when they are too tired to manage what they're feeling, and it gets out anyway. Something that was gratitude and something that was loss, and something that was neither of those things. Something unnamed that he recognized because he had felt its shape before without ever having had a word for it. "Of course," she said. "James, I know," he said. "No. She stopped. Tried again. "I don't know how to do this part, the thanking. I'm not good at it." "You don't have to be good at it," he said. "I want to be," she said. "You came here and you didn't just help me. You were." She looked at him, and for a moment every version of Vivian Carter, the CEO, and the daughter and the woman on the terrace, and the woman on the phone with Lily, was there at once, visible and unmanaged and entirely real. You were just yourself the whole time. "I don't know a lot of people who can do that." He looked at her. He thought about saying something simple, something clean, something that closed the loop, but what he actually said was quieter than that and more honest. "You were yourself, too," he said. "Both of us just were who we are. That's all it was." She looked at him for a moment that was longer than a goodbye moment, but shorter than a declaration. And in that space between those two things, something was acknowledged that neither of them put into language because neither of them was ready for it to be language yet. Then she stepped forward and she put her arms around him. Brief, real, the kind of embrace that has nothing performed in it, just the simple physical acknowledgement of something that has passed between two people and cannot be summarized any other way. He held it. Then she stepped back. "Drive safe," she said. "I will tell Lily." She stopped, smiled slightly. The smile that wasn't quite a smile. "Tell Captain I said hello." He almost laughed. Almost. "He'll appreciate that." He picked up his keys, walked to the front door, opened it. The afternoon was bright and warm, the air carrying the promise of the evening's fireworks of the day, completing itself the way Canada Day always did, with light and noise and the particular Canadian conviction that celebrating what you love loudly and without apology is its own form of meaning. He walked to his car. He got in. He sat for one moment with his hands on the steering wheel and the house behind him, and everything that had happened in the last 36 hours settling into him like sediment finding its level. Then he started the engine and drove home to his daughter. He made it home by 1600. Margaret's house was 3 doors down, a small, tidy place with window boxes that she replanted every spring with the seriousness of someone preparing for inspection. He had barely pulled into his driveway before he heard the screen door bang open and the sound of sneakers on pavement. Lily hit him at full speed. He caught her the way he always caught her, one arm sweeping under her, the other around her back, her whole small weight against his chest, and she locked her arms around his neck and didn't say anything for a moment, just held on, and he held on back, and the 36 hours of the Carter estate, and the procurement documents, and Garrett's carefully managed face and Vivian on the terrace dissolved into the specific weight of his daughter in his arms, which was the truest thing he knew. Hey bud, he said into her hair. You smell like someone else's house, she announced. I was in someone else's house. She leaned back to look at him. With those dark, quick eyes that missed nothing. Are you okay? I'm good, she studied him. The way she studied things thorough, a little too sharp for 7. Then she seemed satisfied. Margaret made pot roast. 3, she said. You could have some if you wanted. I told her you would. She wriggled down and took his hand and walked him back toward Margaret's door with the proprietary confidence of someone managing a logistics operation. Oh, and I told Captain what Vivian said. He seemed pleased. James stopped walking for one step. Just one. You told Captain. He likes knowing people are thinking about him. She glanced up. Is she nice, Vivian? He started walking again. Yes, she's very nice. You said that about your last dentist. That's different. You didn't sound different. He looked down at her. She was looking straight ahead, perfectly innocent with the particular expression she used when she was being deliberately precise and knew it. Vivian is, he paused, thought about the honest answer. She's someone who carries a lot and doesn't complain about it and gets things done. I respect her a lot. Lily considered this like you. He didn't answer that. Margaret's pot roast was excellent, and she sat across from them at her kitchen table with her tea and asked James exactly 2 questions about his weekend. Neither of them personal, both of them practical. Because Margaret O'Shea was 71 years old and had raised 4 children and understood the architecture of privacy. And then she let the conversation go where Lily took it, which was immediately to the snickerdoodle situation, and then to a detailed account of the movie they had watched the previous evening, and then to a question about whether fireworks hurt the ears of rabbits, which was asked on behalf of Captain. Captain doesn't have ears that work, James said. He has ears, Lily said firmly. They're decorative. Then they won't be bothered by fireworks. I just wanted to make sure. She ate a piece of potato. Are we watching them tonight? The fireworks. If you want to. I want to. She looked at him. Can we do it from the backyard like last year with the blanket? Yes. And the good hot chocolate. Not the packet kind. I'll make it from scratch. She smiled, the full one, the one that had Claire's shape and her own particular warmth. Okay. That's good. He walked her home after dinner. She carried Captain with excessive ceremony. He carried her backpack, and the remains of a snickerdoodle she had negotiated from Margaret at the last moment on the grounds that one cookie was a reasonable farewell gift. At home, she settled at the kitchen table to finish a drawing she'd been working on at Margaret's. Something elaborate involving what appeared to be a rabbit in a naval uniform, which she declined to explain. And James stood at the kitchen counter and made hot chocolate from scratch the way Claire had taught him, with actual cocoa and milk and a pinch of salt, and listened to the quiet sounds of his daughter working at the table, the small scratch of her marker, the occasional sigh of artistic frustration. This was the thing he had been fighting for. This exact thing. Not in any abstract or symbolic sense. This specific kitchen, this specific quiet, this specific child drawing a naval rabbit. While the evening came down, he put the hot chocolate in 2 mugs and brought them to the table. Lily looked up, covered her drawing with her arm. Not finished yet. I'm not looking. You were going to. I was going to look at my hot chocolate, he said, and sat down. She watched him with deep suspicion, then uncovered one corner of the drawing. He did not look. She seemed reluctantly satisfied. They drank their hot chocolate. Dad, she said after a while. Yeah, did you do something important this weekend? The thing you went for? He thought about Vivian handing the papers to Howard. He thought about Howard's face when he read them. He thought about Carl Daring, who was already filing supplemental reports in Ottawa. He thought about what would happen to the Vantage contracts, and the authorization channel, and the shell inside the shell that was Crest Bridge Holdings, and all the quiet damage that had been prevented by a stack of public disclosure documents and a call made at midnight. Yes, he said. I think so. Good. She nodded firmly as if filing this information. Captain thought so too. Captain is very perceptive. I've told him that. She finished the last of her cocoa. Can we do the blanket now? I think the fireworks start at 2100. They did the blanket. They lay on their backs in the backyard with the old quilt that had been Claire's mother's and watched the sky. And at 2115, the first of the community fireworks went up over the bay, distant but clear, the colors blooming and fading over the dark water. And Lily narrated each one with great enthusiasm, and James lay beside her and watched, and didn't say much because she didn't need him to. At some point, her hand found his on top of the blanket. She laced her fingers through his the way she did when she was tired, but didn't want to say so. And he held her hand, and they watched the sky go bright and dark and bright again. And he thought about a lot of things and felt them very quietly. The way you feel things when you are too tired to hold them at arm's length. He thought about Claire. He thought about Vivian saying, "You were just yourself the whole time." And the way her voice had changed on those words. He thought about Howard Carter's handshake and Dorothy's laugh and the specific sound of Lily on the phone saying, "Do you like kids with the straight-faced directness of someone who genuinely needed to know?" He thought about 36 hours and what they had contained. Lily fell asleep before the finale. She always did. He gathered her up. She was heavier than she used to be. Heavier every time, growing in the particular relentless way that children grow when you're not looking directly at them, and carried her inside and got her to bed. Captain installed correctly under her chin, and he stood in the doorway for the 30 seconds that was his ritual. Quiet and grateful and tired, and something else that didn't have a clean name. He went to bed. He fixed the ceiling fan first. It took 11 minutes. He didn't know why he'd waited. Monday morning came the way mornings do after something large, quietly without announcement, with the same alarm and the same dark and the same click of the fan that was now finally smooth. He lay there for 30 seconds, got up, made coffee. Made Lily's lunch at 0700. He sat down at the great kitchen table with his coffee and his phone and found in his email a message from Carl Daring, timestamp 0603, supplemental filing submitted. Oversight committee has been briefed. Formal review initiated. You were right about the timeline, good work. And then after a line break in the particular tone of a man who wanted to say something personal and wasn't quite sure how. Stay well, Commander. He read it twice, set down his phone. Outside the window, the neighborhood was beginning its Monday. Someone's sprinkler. The distant backup signal of a garbage truck. A dog reminding everyone it existed. The ordinary machinery of an ordinary morning running on time the way it always did. Indifferent and reliable, and in its own way, beautiful. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. Vivian. He answered. Good morning, he said. Good morning. Her voice was even contained. The professional register, but softer at the edges than it had been on their first phone call, which felt like a year ago, and was 3 days. I hope I'm not calling too early. I've been up since 0447, a pause. Of course, you have something in it. Not quite warmth, not quite amusement, but the thing between them that had been developing since Saturday morning and still didn't have its right name. How's Lily? Asleep. She made it to about the third firework before she was out. That sounds perfect. A quiet James. The board met this morning. Emergency session. Another pause. Fall called the meeting. He spoke for most of it. She exhaled carefully. Garrett has been suspended from his executive roles pending the federal review. The vote for Monday has been tabled indefinitely. He listened. My father removed himself from the chair vote, she continued voluntarily. He said he thought it should be decided on merit, not on what happened this weekend. A longer pause. The board voted 4-1 to confirm my chairmanship. Effective immediately, Vivian, I know. Her voice had something in it that was raw and real and fighting to stay steady. I know. Congratulations, he said simply. I don't. She stopped, tried again. It doesn't feel like winning. It's not winning, he said. It's just what was supposed to happen happening. Yes. A breath. James, I need to say something to you, and I need you to let me say it without you being gracious about it because I need to actually say it." He waited. "What you did this weekend," she said. "Not just the documents, not just the tactical thinking, or the board positioning, or any of the strategic parts of it. What you did as a person, the way you were with my father, the way you were with Dorothy, the way you—" She paused, and when she continued, her voice had dropped half a register and lost most of its control. "The way you let me hear, Lily. The way you stood on that terrace with me and didn't try to fix everything. You just stood there and said true things." A pause. "I have very few people in my life who say true things. I didn't know until this weekend how much I missed having it." He sat at the kitchen table with his coffee cooling and the morning light starting at the window and his daughter asleep upstairs and listened to Vivian Carter be unguarded, which she had earned the right to be and which he understood precisely what it cost her. "You don't have to miss it," he said. Silence. "James, I mean that plainly," he said, "not as I'm not building to something. I just mean that whatever you need from having someone who says true things, that doesn't have to end with the weekend." A longer silence. "This started as an arrangement," she said carefully. "Yes. The terms of the arrangement have been fully met." "Yes. So what you're describing is something outside the arrangement?" "Yes," he said. "That's what I'm describing." She was quiet for a moment, and he sat with the quiet, and let it be what it was, which was two people on either side of a phone line deciding together whether something was true. "I'd like to see Lily," she said finally. "Properly, not as part of anything, just I'd like to meet her." "She already has opinions about you," he said, based on a 3-minute phone call. "She's efficient." Another one of those almost laughs, closer to an actual laugh this time. The gap was narrowing. "I'd like to bring fireworks," she said. "And food, something she'd like." "What does she like?" He thought about it. "Hamburgers. The backyard kind, not the restaurant kind. And sparklers. She has strong feelings about sparklers." "Then I'll bring hamburgers and sparklers," Vivian said. And there was something in her voice that was the sound of a plan forming. Not the calculated kind, not the strategic kind, but the simple human kind where you just want to be somewhere and you're deciding to go. "When?" he asked. "Is Canada Day too soon?" He almost said something. He stopped. Canada Day had been yesterday. She meant next year, the way people say, "Let's do this at Canada Day," when they mean let's make this a thing that happens. Let's give it a date and a ritual so that it becomes real. He understood that, but then she said, "Or I meant, this week, Thursday, Lily said she wanted to celebrate. Properly, I heard her say it on the phone, that you hadn't done sparklers yet." "You want to come this Thursday?" he said. "If that's yes," he said. "Thursday works." "Okay." A breath. "Okay," he told Lily on Tuesday evening while she was brushing her teeth. He stood in the bathroom doorway and said, "Vivian is going to come by Thursday. She's bringing food and sparklers." Lily stopped brushing. Looked at him in the mirror. Her expression went through approximately 4 distinct phases in 2 seconds, which he tracked with the practice of a man who had been reading that face for 7 years. Then she said around her toothbrush, "I knew it." "You didn't know anything." She spit, rinsed, turned around. "Dad, I talked to her on the phone for 3 minutes and I knew." "What exactly did you know?" She gave him the look. The look that was fully Claire's. The one that said, "I know more than you want me to know, and we both know it." That. She was different. Lily said, "Different from what?" "From how you sound when you talk about work people," she said. "You sound different, not work, different person, different." He stood with that for a moment. "She's coming as a friend," he said. "I want you to understand that." "Okay," Lily said equitably. "I mean it, Lily. I know." She picked up Captain from the edge of the sink, where he had been observing proceedings. "Dad? It's okay." She said it with the particular patience of a 7-year-old who has decided the adult in the room needs managing. "I just want you to be happy. I've wanted that for a long time." He looked at his daughter. He thought about all the mornings he had stood in her doorway, at 0545. All the packed lunches, all the school drop-offs, all the evenings where dinner was simple and the conversation was hers to fill because she was better at it than he was. All the nights he had lain awake with the ceiling fan clicking and the particular loneliness of someone who has learned to be sufficient unto himself because the alternative was too much to manage. "I am happy," he said. "I know," she said. "You're getting happier though." She said it matter-of-factly, the way she said most true things, without drama, without performance. With the quiet certainty of someone who has simply noticed. "I can tell." She went to her room. He stood in the bathroom for a moment longer than he needed to. Then he went downstairs and fixed the dripping faucet in the kitchen, which had been dripping for 6 weeks, and it took 9 minutes. And when it was done, he stood at the sink in the quiet kitchen, and felt overall like someone who was getting things done. Thursday came with the particular energy of a summer evening that knows it's supposed to be festive, and commits to it warm and still bright at 1800. The kind of evening where the air smells like cut grass, and somewhere down the street someone has already started a grill. Vivian arrived at 1815. She did not arrive in the black SUV that James had seen at the base. She arrived in a silver sedan that had a small dent near the rear fender, which he noticed and which told him something he couldn't quite articulate. She was wearing a blue cotton dress and carrying a paper grocery bag in each arm, and a bag of sparklers tucked under her elbow. And she looked entirely different from the woman who had stood at the head of a party on Saturday morning and said, "Meet my boyfriend to 50 people." She looked like herself. He understood, seeing her this way, that Saturday had not been herself. This was he opened the door before she could knock because Lily had stationed herself at the window for the previous 20 minutes and had provided live commentary on the arrival of every car on the street. "She has sparklers," Lily said from directly behind his left shoulder. "I see that." Vivian looked up at them both and stopped on the front step. She looked at Lily. Lily looked at her, a mutual assessment of some seriousness. "Hi," Vivian said. "Hi," Lily said. "You're taller than I thought." "You're exactly as I thought," Vivian said. Lily considered this. "What did you think?" "I thought you'd be someone with a lot of opinions and very good instincts," Vivian said. "I was right on both." Lily looked at her father with an expression that said clearly, and without subtlety, "I like her." Then she stepped back to let Vivian in. The evening had its own rhythm, unhurried and real. Vivian had brought ground beef for burgers, not the fancy restaurant kind, just regular ground beef. And she had somehow known to bring brioche buns and cheddar cheese and the specific brand of ketchup that Lily had strong feelings about, which James would have found suspicious. Except that she admitted when asked that she had texted Margaret. "You have Margaret's number," he said. "Dorothy got it for me," she said with the mildest possible expression. "Dorothy gets everything." He looked at her. She looked back. He started the grill. Lily positioned herself as assistant grill manager, a role she took seriously, and which mostly involved standing next to James and asking questions and occasionally tapping the tongs together for no reason. Vivian sat on the back steps and watched them, and at some point, the conversation moved on its own, the way conversations do between people who have already been through something together where you don't need to work at it. You just open your mouth and things come out naturally. Real things, things that have been waiting. Vivian talked about her mother. Not prompted, just talked. The way something becomes speakable once you've been through enough with someone to trust them with it. Her mother had died when Vivian was 26. She had been finishing her MBA. She hadn't come home for the last month because she thought she had more time, and she had been wrong, and she had been carrying that wrongness ever since. "I don't talk about this," she said, and she said it without apology, just as information. "I know," James said. "You don't have to." "I want to," she said. "That's the strange part." She looked at Lily, who was very seriously counting the number of sesame seeds on her bun, and had temporarily stopped listening to the adults, which meant she was definitely listening to the adults. "I think I've been keeping the door closed so long I forgot it could open." James looked at her. He understood exactly what she meant. After the burgers, when the evening had gone soft and the sky was that particular color that happens an hour before full dark, he got the box of matches and Lily got the sparklers and they went to the far end of the backyard. "Okay," Lily announced. "Rules. You hold it away from your body. You don't point it at anyone. You spell your name in the air, and that counts as an artistic statement." She looked at Vivian. "That's the official Callaway sparkler rule." "Those are good rules," Vivian said. "Dad made up the artistic statement part," Lily confided. "He thought it would help me take it seriously." "Did it work?" "Extremely," Lily said. James lit the first sparkler and handed it to Lily, who immediately began spelling her name in large committed letters. He lit the second and held it out to Vivian. She looked at it for a moment. Then she took it, and the first thing she wrote in the air slowly, like someone being careful with something that matters, was a V. He watched her. She looked up, found him watching. And the look between them was the kind that happens when two people arrive at the same understanding at the same moment, and neither of them needs to say anything about it because the understanding is already complete. He lit his own sparkler. He wrote a J. Lily, who had finished her name and moved on to Captain's name, said without looking at them, "This is my favorite Canada Day." "You say that every year," James said. "Because every year it's true," she said. "That's how favorites work, Dad." Vivian made a small sound. The almost laugh, except this time it went all the way. It came out quiet and warm and a little surprised at itself. The sound of someone who has laughed like this before, and had forgotten they could. James looked at her. She looked at him, and there in the backyard with the sparklers burning down and Lily spelling Captain in large glowing letters and the sky going properly dark overhead, and the distant sound of the neighborhood settling into its evening. Something that had been moving toward them for the better part of a week arrived quietly and without ceremony. Not a decision, not a declaration. Just the simple, clear recognition that something real was already here. 2 weeks passed. They talked every other day and the conversations ran long without either of them noting how long they ran. She told him about the federal review moving carefully through the preliminary stages. Garrett's lawyers sending formal letters, the board holding its position, Falk proving more capable under pressure than James had expected. He told her about the procurement irregularities on the defense side being surfaced for formal audit, about the commendation Carl Daring had received from the Oversight Committee, about the quiet satisfaction of watching a system actually work the way it was supposed to work. He told her about Lily's school project, the flag. Lily had brought Claire's Canadian flag to the class presentation. She had stood in front of her class with it held in her hands, still in its triangle, folded exactly as it had been delivered, and explained what it meant and who it belonged to, and why her dad kept it on the bookshelf where he could see it every morning. Mrs. Patterson had called James afterward. She spoke for 4 minutes, the teacher told him, without notes. Incomplete sentences. A pause. She said her dad taught her that keeping something visible means you haven't finished being grateful for it. He had sat in his truck in the school parking lot for a few minutes after that call. He told Vivian about it that evening, straight through without editing. She listened without interrupting, which was the thing she always did. And when he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You didn't teach her that," she said. "What do you mean?" "You taught her that by doing it," she said. "Every morning there's a difference." A pause. "She sees you, James, clearly and completely. Not a lot of people get to be seen that way." He thought about that for a long time after they hung up. No. He thought about it the next morning at 0447 in the dark before the alarm, lying on his back in the quiet. He thought about being seen. He had been efficient and capable and dependable and disciplined for so long that he had lost track of whether anyone was watching the person underneath all of that. Whether there was still a clear view of him beneath the rank and the schedule and the packed lunches and the rituals that held his life together. He thought about Lily with the flag in her hands 4 minutes without notes and complete sentences. He thought about Vivian on the terrace in the dark, every version of herself visible at once. He thought about Howard Carter's handshake and the way it changed. He thought about the almost laugh becoming a real one in the backyard. He thought about what it felt like to build something. Not in the operational sense, not a plan, not a strategy, not a cover story that needed to hold for 48 hours. Something slower and less defined and considerably harder. The kind of thing you build when you decide without quite deciding to stay open to what comes. He had been efficient for a long time. He thought lying there in the dark at 0447 that he might be ready to be something else, too. Not instead. He was not going to stop being the man who got up before sunrise and made Lily's lunch and stood in her doorway for 30 seconds every morning. He was not going to stop being the officer who answered Carl Daring's calls and filed accurate reports and thought tactically and moved carefully. But alongside all of that, underneath it, running through it, something was opening. A door he had not known was still there. The alarm went off. He silenced it, got up, and went downstairs to start the coffee and make Lily's lunch and move through the ordinary morning that held everything he had with the particular steadiness of a man who has decided without drama, without announcement, that he is ready for what comes next. 3 months after the Canada Day weekend, James Calloway received a letter from the Department of National Defense. He found it on a Tuesday morning in the stack of mail he collected from the box at the end of the driveway before Lily woke up. The usual assortment of a utility bill, a catalog. Nobody had ordered a card from his mother in Winnipeg, and the D&D envelope was at the bottom, official and cream-colored, and bearing the seal that he had seen on every significant document of his professional life for the past 16 years. He stood at the kitchen counter and opened it. He read it once standing up. Then he sat down and read it again. Then he set it on the table and made his coffee and stood at the window while it brewed and looked at the backyard at the far end where the sparklers had been, at the steps where Vivian had sat, at the patch of grass where Lily had spelled Captain's name in light, and let the information settle into him the way large things settle when they arrive without warning in the middle of an ordinary morning. The letter was a formal notification of promotion review. His name had been submitted for consideration to the rank of captain. The review board would convene in October. His commanding officer's written endorsement was attached, 3 pages single-spaced. The kind of document that someone wrote when they meant every word he read the endorsement. The 3rd paragraph said, "Commander Calloway demonstrates a quality that is genuinely rare in officers of any rank. The ability to hold the long view while executing precisely in the present. He does not separate his personal integrity from his professional conduct. They are the same thing that is not taught. It is built over years through choices that no one is watching. I have watched. I am certain." He folded the letter, put it back in the envelope. He went upstairs. "Lily time." A groan. "Lily. Grace. Calloway. You said you weren't going to say it 3 times. I said it twice. You said my whole name." "That counts as 3. A pause. "What's wrong?" He leaned in the doorway. She was sitting up, hair everywhere. Captain under her chin, looking at him with the quick dark eyes that caught everything. "Nothing's wrong," he said. "I got some good news this morning." She waited. "The Navy might promote me," he said. "It's not decided yet, but they're considering it." Lily looked at him. "To what?" "Captain." She absorbed this. "You'd be called Captain Calloway. If it goes through, yes." She thought about it with the gravity she applied to most things. Then she said, "Captain Calloway and Captain," and held up the stuffed rabbit. "Yes," he said. "Exactly. That's confusing," she said. "Probably. But good," she said. "Right. Yeah," he said. "It's good." She smiled the full one, and then fell back onto her pillow as if the effort of the smile had exhausted her remaining morning energy. "Tell me more at breakfast," she said. "I need 2 more minutes." "You need 0 more minutes." 2. 1. 1.5. 1. He said, and went back downstairs, and he was almost smiling. He called Vivian that afternoon after Lily was at school, and he was between briefings sitting in his truck in the parking lot of the base with the windows down and the late September air coming through, the particular quality of air that arrives when summer has finally agreed to step back. She answered on the 2nd ring. She always answered on the 2nd ring now, which he had noticed, and which meant something he had stopped pretending it didn't mean. "Hey," she said, not the professional register, the other one. The one she used with him now that was softer at all the edges. "I got a letter this morning," he said. He told her when he finished. The silence on her end was the specific kind that he had learned to read. Not empty, not processing, but full. The kind that happens when someone feels something large enough that words have to wait for it. "James," she said finally, "it's not confirmed yet." James, her voice was, he had no better word for it than warm. Not sentimental, not performed, just genuinely completely warm. The way a room is warm when someone has been taking care of it. "That's extraordinary." "It's a review," he said. "They consider a lot of people." "Stop doing that," she said. "Doing what?" "Managing it down before someone can be happy about it," she said. "Let me be happy about it." He stopped. "Okay," he said. "It's extraordinary," she said again. "And it is completely, entirely unsurprising, and you deserve it. And I want you to sit with that for more than 30 seconds before you start qualifying it." He sat with his phone and the September air, and the distant sound of the bass doing its business, and let her be right. "Okay," he said again, quieter. "Thank you," she said. As if he'd given her something. "Then I want to take you to dinner. You and Lily somewhere real. Not the backyard. Lily has opinions about restaurants," he said. "I know. She texted me a list." He stopped. "She texted you last week. She said she was being proactive." A pause. "She's 9 years old, going on 37. She's 7. She is operating well above her age range," Vivian said firmly. He looked out the windshield. He thought about his daughter, 7 years old, texting Vivian restaurant recommendations, telling him "I knew it" in the bathroom mirror, carrying Claire's flag to school, and speaking for 4 minutes without notes, growing constantly and quietly into a person who took the world seriously and met it directly and loved without complication. He thought about what it meant that Lily had texted Vivian unprompted. He thought about what it meant that Vivian had kept the text and mentioned it. "Now, Saturday," he said. "Saturday," she agreed. The restaurant Lily had recommended was a place on the waterfront that served crab cakes and had paper on the tables that you were encouraged to draw on, which was Lily's primary criterion for any dining establishment. They arrived at 1,830, and Lily immediately claimed the crayons from the center of the table and began a mural that she described as interpretive, and which appeared to involve multiple naval vessels and at least one rabbit in an admiral's hat. Vivian sat across from her and watched with genuine interest and asked questions about the artistic choices that Lily answered with great seriousness. James sat between them and ate his crab cake and listened to his daughter explain the symbolism of the rabbit's epaulets to a woman who had chaired a billion-dollar defense company for 3 months and was currently giving the said epaulets her full undivided attention. This was the thing he had not expected. Not Vivian with him. He had begun to expect that, had begun to let himself expect it in the careful way you let yourself want something, when you've spent long enough deciding whether you're allowed to. What he hadn't expected was Vivian with Lily. The specific way she was with Lily. Not performing, not trying, not doing the thing that adults sometimes do with children, where they pitch their attention slightly above the child's head toward the parent they're actually trying to impress. She was just present, genuinely, fully present with his daughter, taking the rabbit's epaulets seriously because Lily took them seriously, and that was enough reason. After dinner, while Lily was finishing the mural, she had expanded it to cover most of the paper and was now adding what appeared to be fireworks. Vivian looked at James. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Yes." "I spoke to my father yesterday," she said. "About Garrett?" She paused. "The Federal Review is moving faster than anticipated. The evidence is it's substantial. The preliminary findings indicate the procurement fraud goes back further than we thought, closer to 3 years. Carl mentioned they were expanding the scope," James said. "He's going to lose more than the board seat," Vivian said quietly. "His lawyers have been in contact with the Justice Department. There may be a plea arrangement." James looked at her. How is your father? She stopped. He called me this week, which he doesn't do. He usually waits for me to call him. He said he'd been thinking about my mother about the last few years before she died, and what he wished he'd said and what he'd let go unsaid. She looked down at the paper tablecloth at the edge of Lily's mural. He said he didn't want to repeat that pattern. With you? With me? She looked up. He apologized, James, not for Garrett, not directly, but for the years of listening to Garrett's version of things without asking for mine, for letting a narrative build without pushing back on it. A pause. It was the hardest conversation I've had with him in a long time, and also it was the most real. Good, James said. Is it? Yes, he said. Hard and real is better than smooth and false. Every time she looked at him, and the look had that quality. It sometimes had that particular openness that she had learned over the last 3 months to stop closing so quickly. She held it. I've been thinking, she said, about what comes next for the company. We're expanding the veteran employment programs. I want to triple the scope by next fiscal year, and the contract renewals after the fraud review are going to need significant reconstruction. She paused. I want to do it right. Not fast. Right. You'll do it right, he said. I know, she said. Not arrogant. Just certain. The way she was certain about things, she had earned the certainty to claim. I'm telling you because you're part of why I know that. He looked at her. The weekend in July, she said. What you said on the terrace about Garrett? He's exactly the kind of man I've been fighting my whole career, just in different clothes. I've thought about that sentence probably 50 times since then. She paused. You didn't fight him with anything larger than who you are. You just were who you are, and it was enough, more than enough. She looked at him steadily. I want to lead the company that way. I want to be that kind of certain about what I'm standing for. You already are, he said. I'm learning to be, she said. There's a difference. Lily looked up from her mural. Dad, come see. I need a second opinion on the fireworks. He got up. He went and looked at the fireworks. Bright, overlapping, drawn with the committed energy of someone who had been studying the real thing all summer. He said they were excellent. Lily said she knew, but she wanted confirmation. He confirmed. He looked back at Vivian over Lily's head. She was watching them both, and her expression was the thing he had first seen on the Carter Estate terrace, every version of her visible at once. Layered and unguarded and entirely real, except that now it had something else in it that hadn't been there in July. Something that had grown in the space between then and now, quietly, without announcement, the way things grow when they have the right conditions and enough time. He recognized it because he felt it too. Yes. October arrived. The promotion review board convened on a Wednesday. James was not present for the deliberations. He submitted his record, his endorsements, his service documentation, and then he waited, which was the thing you did because the Navy moved on its own timeline, and there was no tactical advantage to impatience. He waited by going to work, by getting Lily to school, by calling his mother in Winnipeg on Sunday afternoons, by talking to Vivian every other evening. Conversations that had stopped having a defined beginning or end that picked up where they left off, and left off where they would pick up again. Continuous and easy, the way long conversations are when both people have decided they want them to continue. He waited by fixing things around the house. The screen door hinge, the back step that had been uneven since spring, a slow leak under the bathroom sink that he had been meaning to address since before Canada Day, and now finally was addressing. Lily observed these repairs with approval. You're fixing everything, she said one Saturday morning, watching him work on the screen door. Been meaning to, he said. You've been meaning to for a long time, she said. What changed? He tightened the hinge, tested the door. Nothing changed, he said. I just decided to stop waiting. She absorbed this. Is that what grown-ups do? She said. Wait for a long time and then just decide to stop. Some grown-ups, he said. The slower ones. She patted his shoulder in the manner of someone who finds this information both troubling and unsurprising. Well, she said, I'm glad you stopped. The notification came on a Thursday morning, an email official, Navy communication, arriving at 0743, while James was driving Lily to school. He didn't read it until he had dropped her off. He sat in the parking lot outside her school and opened it on his phone. He read it. Then he sat there for a moment with his phone in his hand, and the engine running and the school noise of kids arriving all around him. And he let it be real. Dear Commander Calloway, it is our honor to notify you that your promotion to the rank of Captain Royal Canadian Navy has been approved by the Review Board and confirmed by the Office of the Chief of Naval Personnel, effective the 1st of November. He called Vivian. She answered before the second ring. Tell me, she said. She already knew from his timing he never called this early. It's confirmed, he said. A silence. Then she said his name, and the way she said it, James had everything in it. Pride and warmth and something deeper than either, something that lived below the named emotions in the place where things are simply true. Captain Calloway, she said. Apparently, I want to say something, she said, and I need you to hear it completely before you respond. Okay. You are the most capable, most decent, most genuinely good man I have met in my adult life, she said. Her voice was steady and clear, and had none of the careful management that it used to have, the managed quality that she'd been slowly putting down over 3 months, like a bag that had gotten too heavy to keep carrying. And I am not saying that because you helped me in July. I am saying it because I have watched you for 3 months be exactly who you were on that first day. The same person at 0600 in the morning at my father's house that you are at 2300 on the phone with me. The same person with Lily that you are in a briefing room. I don't know many people who are the same person in every room. You are a pause. I love that about you. I want you to know that I love that about you. He was quiet for a moment. The school parking lot was emptying. The last few kids were running for the entrance. A crossing guard was folding her stop sign down. Vivian, he said. Yes. I love that you say true things, he said. Even when they're hard, even when it costs you something to say them. He paused. I love the way you listened when I talked about Claire and never made it something it wasn't. I love that you take Lily's opinions seriously, all of them, including the ones about Captain's epaulets. He stopped, started again. I love that you brought regular ground beef and the right brand of ketchup and sparklers to my backyard. And I love that my daughter texted you a restaurant list and you kept it. Another pause. I've been alone for 4 years in the way that you get alone when you decide it's the responsible thing. And I think I've been ready to stop deciding that for longer than I've admitted. The silence was the good kind, the full kind. James, she said finally. Yeah. Come see me this weekend, she said. Bring Lily. Bring Captain. We'll do something with no agenda, no plan. Just whatever it is. He said. Yes, she said. Just whatever it is. They came on Saturday. Vivian had a house in the city, not the Carter estate. Her own house, a brownstone she had bought 8 years ago, and furnished slowly room by room over the years, in the way that people furnish houses when they're not performing for anyone, and are just trying to make something that feels like theirs. It had books on every flat surface, and good light in the afternoon, and a back garden that was small and slightly overgrown and entirely genuinely lived in. Lily walked through the front door, looked around with great thoroughness, and said, "This is a real house." "Thank you," Vivian said. "I mean, it's a real person's house, not a magazine house." She looked at a stack of books on the coffee table. "Dad's house is like this, too. Books everywhere and things that need fixing." "The screen door," James said. "He fixed the screen door," Lily told Vivian. "And the sink and the step?" "I know," Vivian said. "He told me." Lily looked at her. "You two talk a lot." "We do," Vivian agreed. Lily considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Then she held up Captain. "He wanted to see your house. She said he's interested in new environments." "Tell him he's very welcome," Vivian said, without even a flicker. "I have a garden he might like. He'll want to see it," Lily said immediately, and moved toward the back of the house. James stood in the front hallway. Vivian stood a few feet away. "Hello," she said. "Hello," he said. It was the first time they had seen each other since the restaurant dinner, since the phone call in the school parking lot. Since everything that had been building for 3 months had been named quietly without ceremony in 2 phone calls on opposite ends of a Thursday morning. She looked at him the way she had been looking at him since July. Except now, there was no layer of managing in it. No careful distance maintained for safety or professionalism, or any of the other reasons people maintain distance from things they want. He crossed the hallway. He put his arms around her. She put her arms around him. They stood there in her front hallway with the afternoon light coming through the transom and Lily's voice carrying from the back garden as she narrated the garden's features to Captain, and the simple complete weight of it of being where he was with the person he was with arrived at. Slowly and honestly, and without anything false settled into him all the way down. She held on. He held on back. "Okay," she said into his shoulder. A breath. The word that meant more than it said, that meant yes. And finally, and I was ready, and I didn't know I was waiting until I stopped. "Okay," he said back. November 1st, James Calloway was formally promoted to captain in a ceremony at the naval base that took 45 minutes, and was witnessed by his commanding officer, his colleagues, Margaret O'Shea, who wore her best coat and cried twice without acknowledging it, and Lily, who had made a card that said, "Captain Calloway, the Human One," in large, careful letters with a drawing of a ship that was technically inaccurate but artistically committed. Vivian was there. She sat in the second row. She was wearing a blue dress, not the simple one from the backyard, a different one, more formal, chosen for this occasion. She had her hands folded in her lap, and she watched the ceremony with the full attention she gave to everything that mattered. And when they pinned the rank on James, and the room applauded, she was the person he looked for first. She was already looking at him. Afterward, when the ceremony had moved into the informal gathering that follows these things, coffee, handshakes, photographs, the particular social warmth of people who are glad to be celebrating something straightforwardly good, Lily found him at the edge of the room and stood beside him and slipped her hand into his. "Captain Calloway," she said. "That's me," he said. "Mom would have been really loud," Lily said. She would have clapped the loudest, and then she would have said something embarrassing. He looked down at her. "She would have," he agreed. "I clapped pretty loud," Lily said. "You did. You clapped the loudest." She seemed satisfied. She leaned against his arm for a moment, not holding on, just leaning the way she did when she wanted to be close without making a production of it. Then she straightened. "Vivian's coming to dinner, right?" "Yes. And we're doing the real hot chocolate." "Yes." "Good." She looked up at him with those dark, quick eyes that missed nothing and never had. "Dad? Are you happy?" He thought about the letter on the kitchen table in September. He thought about the school parking lot in October. He thought about July, about Vivian's hand in his in front of 50 people, about the terrace in the dark, about Lily on the phone saying, "Do you like kids with the genuine need to know?" He thought about this morning about 0447, and the smooth ceiling fan and the coffee and the packed lunch and Lily's hair everywhere and the particular specific, irreplaceable weight of this life he had built that had cost him things and given him more than it cost, that held both grief and gratitude so completely that they had become indistinguishable from each other. He thought about Vivian in the second row, looking at him before he looked for her. "Yeah," he said, "I'm happy." Lily nodded like she'd already known, like she'd known for a while and had just been waiting for him to catch up. "Good," she said. "Come on. Vivian said she'd help with dinner. And I want to show her how we do the hot chocolate." She pulled him by the hand across the room toward the woman standing near the door, who turned when she heard them coming and looked at them both, father and daughter, hand in hand, moving through the room together with an expression that had nothing performed in it, and everything real. He let himself be pulled, and the life that had been waiting, not somewhere else, not in some other version of things, but here, exactly here in this room, on this afternoon, with these people, opened fully and held. He had fought many battles at sea and on land, in boardrooms and briefing rooms, and the quiet wars of a kitchen at 0500 in the morning. He had fought for discipline and for justice, and for the people underneath him and the daughter beside him. The greatest thing he had ever done was stay open long enough to let this find him, and it had found him. And it was without qualification, without condition, without a single thing left to manage or protect, or hold at arm's length enough, more than enough. It was everything.